Hello again, and welcome back to Bite-Sized Kierkegaard. My name's David. I'm not an expert. You might want to go through the introduction to the series. Click on the link below to see, basically what I'm doing. But I'm basically going through all of Kierkegaard's works in order and sort of explaining things and sharing my thoughts. I might be missing things, so forth, but this is what I'm getting out of it basically. And today we're doing either or, a bit of either or. This is a section called the Diapsalmata, which is the first part of either or, and it's really just a collection of these aphorisms. A lot of them are pretty famous, and you probably have heard of a few of them before. I'll definitely highlight those. The nice thing about aphorisms is you don't really need them in context, like they kind of survive on their own. And it is kind of a weird way to start, a philosophical journey in this time. This is the time of Hegel and systems and structured philosophy and everything. Aphorisms are kind of like more poetic. Although certainly not unheard of to have like philosophical aphorisms. If you look back, some of those Greek thinkers, we only have aphorisms for them, because these are the like the pithy sayings that resonated with other authors, and they quoted them in their works. And unfortunately, the original work no longer survives, so we just have bits of aphorisms of these philosophers, but a little bit different than what Kierkegaard's trying here. But remember, in the introduction to either or, these are two volumes meant to be kind of like from different authors. Author A and author B. Author A is, how shall we say it, kind of like an emotional, very poetic, very depressed young man. And B is very different, a little more settled down in life and has a different perspective. That's a bit jumping the gun again, but these are two different characters. So this is A's aphorisms. So kind of just, like it seems kind of random in a lot of places, but there's a theme that definitely, that you can get out of it. I wrote down a few themes that I got out of it. Depression, sadness, this comes up a lot in a lot of places. I think it's like the most pages that I wrote down for depression, like all these things just sort of, lighting up like this author is super depressed, and I think it's not a mistake to say that this is Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard is a pretty melancholy fellow, and this comes out in a lot of it. And this is another place where it's like, you should not use Kierkegaard's life as a model to follow. Like, I don't think it's healthy. He did not live like a healthy mental life. He's a brilliant guy, but it's like he's obviously super depressed, and you see that come out in a lot of places. Also, a theme of like freedom and possibility. That is very, by definition, like existentialist. And he's sort of putting the foundations down for that existentialism, that freedom, and the paradox and the anxiety that comes out of that, trying to make those choices. Some of those things, one quote in particular I'm going to mention is pretty famous along those lines. Also, the themes of busyness, which comes up again and again in Kierkegaard, anti-busyness, also boredom, and also criticizing the lack of passion and the lack of actuality in his age. And we'll talk about a bit about what that means. And then a few little sprinklings, some little name dropping of Mozart and Don Giovanni, which is going to make a nice transition into the next section where he's all talking about Don Giovanni. But let me just go through a few things that really stood out. I'll start with the most famous passages. I think this is the easiest one for me to find because I wrote 3 lines next to them, so they jump out at me. This is how I highlight. Just write a line next to it. Here's one about busyness. On page 9, and again, these are pages in the original, so this matches up to the original page numbers. If you have a different edition, it'll be in the margin, hopefully. But this is about busyness. What after all do these busy bustlers achieve? Are they not just like that woman who, in a flurry because the house was on fire, rescued the fire tongs? What more, after all, do they salvage from life's huge conflagration? And he starts that passage with the most ludicrous of all ludicrous things, it seems to me, is to be busy in the world, to be a man who is brisk at his meals and brisk at his work. Just busyness is life, and that is very true today. Like, people are busier than ever, it seems like. This isn't one of the more famous passages, but this is on page 15. Another aphorism, so it doesn't really have a connection. It's all just loose aphorisms. Kierkegaard starts, in a theater it happened that a fire started off stage. The clown came out to tell the audience. They thought it was a joke and applauded. He told them again, and they still became more hilarious. This is the way I suppose that the world will be destroyed, amid the universal hilarity of wits and wags who think it is all a joke. Pretty famous passage there. Let me see if I can grab another one here. I'm looking for these 3 lines here. This is definitely the most famous out of this whole section. Maybe out of this whole book or out of Kierkegaard in general. So this is pretty special, this part. Starting at the end of page 22 in the original. Marry, and you will regret it. Do not marry, and you also regret it. Marry or do not marry, you will regret it either way. Whether you marry or you do not marry, you will regret it either way. Laugh at the stupidities of the world, and you will regret it. Weep over them, you will also regret it. Laugh at the stupidities of the world or weep over them, you'll regret it either way. Whether you laugh at the stupidities of the world or you weep over them, you will regret it either way. Trust a girl, and you'll regret it. Do not trust her, and you'll also regret it. Trust a girl or do not trust her, you will regret it either way. Whether you trust a girl or you do not trust her, you will regret it either way. Hang yourself, you will regret it. Do not hang yourself, you will also regret it. Hang yourself or do not hang yourself, you will regret it either way. Whether you hang yourself or do not hang yourself, you will regret it either way. This, gentlemen, is the quintessence of all wisdom of life. It is not merely in isolated moments that I, as Spinoza says, view everything in the eternal mode, but in continually in the eternal mode. So I think I started quoting into another section there, but you get the idea that, and this is all about, choice. Like, you have these options, you have these life possibilities open to you, and there's a sort of, he'll talk about this in other books, but there's an anxiety that comes with that choice. And it may sound kind of stupid, but like I feel like this at some restaurants where you get a menu and there's like literally 100 things on the menu, and you have a paradox of choice. Like, it makes you uncomfortable that you have so many options. You almost need a guide or a mentor to tell you, like, these are the good things on the menu, because like they can't be good. Like, this restaurant is suspicious. They can't be good at everything, right? There's got to be a few dishes that they're good at, and like a direction that I should take, and I need some steering towards that, right? And it's just like in life, you have all these options, especially when you're younger, before all these options get closed off to you, which it seems like it happens as you get older and older. Uncomfortably and comfortably, for good, bittersweet way, options start closing off, but like, it's less stressful to be presented with less options. But like, these are the fundamental options of life, right? Marry or do not marry. You can, your attitude towards the world, laugh at the world, trust a girl, hang yourself. Like, these are all options. Like, suicide is definitely an option, right? And that comes out in the later existentialists, obviously. We're talking about like, thinking about like Camus, and so forth, but this is obviously predating him. But this is very existentialist. This nervousness, this anxiety of these choices, and I think, let's see here. Yeah, and kind of in the same way, this is not a particularly famous passage, but it also alludes to a similar thing about possibility, and also kind of depression. His depression. At the end of page 25, he says, "My soul has lost possibility. If I were to wish for something, I would wish not for wealth or power, but for the passion of possibility, for the eye eternally young, eternally ardent, that sees possibility everywhere. Pleasure disappoints, possibility does not. And what wine is so sparkling, so fragrant, so intoxicating." This is kind of alluding towards some later themes of the book, kind of a continual seeking, and then getting, and then not being satisfied with the getting, like a very, and also like kind of like a Buddhist way, kind of like, you know, being dissatisfied with the world, or wanting, like a constant wanting that's never satiated. And this is kind of like showing that in a way, like that possibility, like that wanting, that craving is, you know, in some sense, like, you know, greater than actually acquiring. And I feel like this is true in my own life too. Like, you know, like I remember, I think I mentioned this, I might have mentioned this before, but I mentioned this to some folks before, where it's like, you know, like I started my career, moved to Silicon Valley, you know, moved out of my parents' place and got my first apartment. And I remember, you know, I had all this money all of a sudden that I started getting, and not really smartly investing it as I should have, but kind of like, oh, I have a couple hundred extra dollars, I can buy all of the game systems. So I think there were like three at the time. Well, yeah, I think we had a Wii at home, and then I decided I wanted an Xbox and a PlayStation, and I could get whatever my heart desired, really, and I can get all the games I wanted. Not that I went crazy on all the games, but I had everything. Like I had access to everything, but I felt like, you know, like when I actually had it, then I was not really satisfied. I remember when I was a kid, I had a craving for all these things, and I had a craving for these entertainment systems. Like, you know, I had friends who had like a Super Nintendo, and I had a real craving for that. And I remember getting it, and it was satisfying, but it's like there is kind of like a lusting after that almost like you enjoy more than acquiring. So like I think that's what he's really talking about here. That seeing these possibilities all over the place. Um, yeah, so interesting. So, and as I mentioned before, like there's a lot of Kierkegaard's depression that comes out in here. A lot of these passages. There's like a lot that almost too many to mention. It's starting right off like the first aphorism. What is a poet? An unhappy person who conceals profound anguish in his heart, but whose lips are so formed that as sighs and cries pass over them, they sound like beautiful music. It's a really beautiful way of describing, you know, depression. Like, and I think that you know, definitely Kierkegaard had a way of dealing with his depression, not through you know, speaking or music, but through writing. He had a, you know, graphomania, and this was like his way of coping with it. And he, you know, obviously a bookshelf full of books, and this is like the beautiful music. This was his product. You know, this is what he was doing, what he was making. But like fundamentally an unhappy person. Again, on page 5, I'm not sure I should go through all of these, but get the idea that, yeah, he's pretty depressed. Page 6, I say of my sorrow what the Englishman says of his house. My sorrow is my castle. Many people look upon having sorrow as one of life's conveniences. Not super sure what that second sentence really means. This sounds really familiar to a passage at the end, which I'll also quote on page 26, at the end of this section, page 26. My sorrow is my baronial castle, which lies like an eagle's nest high up on a mountain peak among the clouds. No one can take it by storm. From it I swoop down into actuality and snatch my prey, but I do not stay down there. I bring my booty home. This booty is a picture I weave into the tapestries at my castle. Then I live as one already dead. Everything I have experienced I immerse in a baptism of oblivion into an eternity of recollection. Everything temporal and fortuitous is forgotten and blotted out. Then I sit like an old gray-haired man, pensive and explain the pictures in a soft voice, almost whispering, and beside me sits a child listening, although he remembers everything before I tell it. Um, Getting a little obscure here, but like there's a lot of these are very like Kierkegaardian, swooping down into actuality. And there's different passages here where he's talking about, he's kind of like bemoaning that his age isn't really acting. It's sort of like lost in reflection, or head in the clouds, the typical philosopher. That's what he's talking about, swooping down into actuality, like doing thing, like being a person of action. Is a very existentialist thing. Another thing that alludes to that, where he talks about that his age lacking, actuality, which I think kind of reflects our own age too. At the end of page 16, what philosophers say about actuality is often just as disappointing as one reads in a sign in a second-hand shop, "Pressing done here." If a person were to bring his clothes to be pressed, he would be duped, for the sign is merely for sale. And it's like false advertising. And it's like, here's this thing that it's like promised, but it's like, oh, it's like not, it's not really, that's not the right place to go to look for what you're looking for. And I feel less, especially with philosophy today, like a lot of like analytic philosophy, sort of like obsessed with the meanings of sentences and the meanings of the words, and that like nothing actually happens that gives you a hint as to like how you're supposed to live your life. Like how we're nitpicking about the meanings of words and sentences and in context and things like that. It's interesting, but it's a lot of like real navel gazing. It's like, I don't know how to apply this to my life. Which is like that's the question that Socrates is asking, right? It's like, how should I live my life, right? And I feel like a lot of modern philosophy, especially, like analytic philosophy, it's like kind of like false advertising, because you hear that, oh, philosophy, it's supposed to be the meaning of life. It turns out like, no, you never even get to that. You live your whole life and it's all analyzing the meanings of the words and constructing the sentences, and it's just like, I don't know. It's so unsatisfying. It's like that, pressing done here, but it's in an antique shop, or it's it's just like they're selling the sign, and it's like that's not the right place to go to get that, right? So it's like, there's something missing. There's that actuality that's missing, right? The actuality is like a person living their life, right? It's like making those decisions, right? And it's like philosophy at his time, and I think our time too, doesn't really give hints as to do that. Although you can find it in different places, but you have to look. It's not mainstream philosophy. Um, that's a lot. And also, I won't quote it, but the times are lacking passion. I think our times have a bit of passion, maybe too much passion. But he's also talking about, it's a similar thing. It's like, like, everything is to be analyzed and to be put into a system, very Hegelian, right? And it's sort of like the the marrow, or what makes it lively, what makes it interesting, is like taken out of it. Like that passion is taken out of it. So like this is a great way to put passion back into philosophy. We'll start it with these aphorisms that are pretty poetic. An interesting way to start. And I should say also, the Diapsalmata is the title of this section. It kind of means like a lyrical pause. This is like if you read the Bible and Psalms, after some passages you can say Selah. That's the Diapsalmata. It's like a musical pause, and saying that, like, it's kind of weird. It's kind of hard to. I'm not sure I understand why he called this section Diapsalmata, but the reference to like a musical thing is kind of like transitioning to the next section, which is going to be about Don Giovanni, and it's sort of saying that, like, hey, there's something that's expressed in the musical here that we can't express with language, something that goes beyond language, which is interesting, right? And how do you talk about that? How do you write a whole essay about that, right? Is that even possible? So that'll be next time in the very interesting, tantalizing title, The Immediate Erotic Stages. So Okay, we're getting into some smut here. No, we're getting into some interesting stuff. He's gonna geek out over Mozart. So I hope you join me next time. But thanks for listening to me, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.